I want to know from you guys and from the listeners if a law can be broken when there's no victim. All right. And I'm asking this because a tattooist has just been jailed for 3 years. His crime was to remove people's nipples at their request. Yeah. So Brendan McCarthy is his name. He traded as Dr. Evil. That's his choice. And he pleaded guilty last month to 3 counts of causing grievous bodily harm with intent, despite no complaint, as I understand it, coming from any victim, in inverted commas. The court heard how customers had consented to various procedures performed by McCarthy, the removal of an ear, the division of a tongue to create a forked tongue, and thirdly, the removal of a nipple. Sentencing the 50-year-old in Wolverhampton, the judge said that McCarthy had no qualifications to carry out surgical procedures or deal with any adverse consequences which could have arisen. OK, I'll take that. And to be fair, it's been a long-running legal case. It started at Crown Court, I think went to Court of Appeal. And so far he's had no joy. Now, as I said, it reminds me of a case back in, I think it was the 1980s, which resulted from a police operation known as Operation Spanner. And this case involved, it was a group of men, I think 16 men, who were convicted of actual bodily harm, despite none of the men complaining. And the crime, for want of a better word, was they were indulged in a sadomasochistic sexual activity, consensual sadomasochistic sexual activity. And as I can recall, this case, so none of the men are found guilty of ABH, despite none of them complaining they had been assaulted. And they took their grievance. They felt they'd been badly treated through every court in the land, all the way to the European Court of Human Rights, who sided with the UK courts, stick that in your pipe, Brexit supporters, and ruled that a person doesn't have the legal ability to consent to an act which will cause serious bodily harm. OK, specifically something like sadomasochism. And yet mountaineers can go mountaineering. Yeah, I mean, only last month, Tom Ballard, he died in Pakistan on a mountain range where his mother, Alison Hargreaves, had also died. Now, joining us to explain both Operation Spanner and his thoughts on this whole situation is Derek Cohen, and he's the honorary president of the Spanner Trust, which exists, as I understand it, to defend the rights of sadomasochists. It's a free country, folks. Let's not forget that. It is for now. Derek Cohen, welcome to our show. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hi there.
Hi there. Can you have a crime when there is no victim, Derek?
Well, clearly in the Spanner case and in Brendan's case, you can. That's one of the similarities, as is the issue of consent. The difference between the cases is actually to do with, I suppose, the degree of injury. In the Spanner case, there were no lasting injuries. A few days later, you would never have known that anything had gone wrong. Any of the bruises or cuts would have gone. I don't think you could say the same is the case for in Brendan's case.
No.
But clearly someone's going around without an ear.
But that was the desired result, a desired outcome of the person who had engaged Mr. McCarthy's services.
Yes, I think it's to some extent it's to do with skill levels, removing an ear or splitting on a surgical procedures, and doctors spend many years training to be surgeons and coping with doing it safely, and I think, as one of the judges said, with any of the after effects. So I don't think that Brendan's case and the Spanner case are the same, because we're not talking about things that are permanent. In Brendan's case, what he did was permanent, and in the Spanner case, they were fairly trifling and transient, or
yes.
not enough for the judges.
I absolutely take your point on the difference, but the similarities are
yes.
Nobody is complaining that anything bad or criminal or injurious had happened to them. Everyone was happy with the resultant outcome. So if everyone's happy, no one's complaining, and our hard-pressed police are having a hard enough time at the moment dealing with issues like knife crime, why do we waste time on cases like this?
I think that there's a view that there are some things that people need to be protected from.
Themselves.
I mean, there are. Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, if you look at cosmetic surgery, which is to some extent similar to what Brendan was doing, there are lots of back street cosmetic surgeans who do botched jobs, and people have the right to be protected from what they think is a competent person doing something, so that they don't end up with bad side effects. And maybe even death. So I think that yes, you can consent to these things, but you sometimes do need to protect people from from things that they can't foresee. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, although within that, you see, I'm thinking, it's almost like we're saying that people need protecting from themselves, which the sort of libertarian inside me is thinking, well, actually, if somebody, I always think if somebody wants to inject heroin mainline, let them. If that's what they want to do. If someone wants to, have an ear removed or a nipple removed, that's what they want to do, then I'm not going to stand in their way. I mean, I might think it's foolish, but it's not for me to stop them. And if they suffer untoward, unexpected consequences, well, again, caveat emptor, they decided to do it. That's their problem. It's not mine.
I don't think that people were being protected from themselves. I think they were being protected from people satisfying their desires or these wishes who weren't competent to do it. So, yes, if I want to have my tongue split, you're not protecting me from myself, you're protecting me from someone who might seriously injure me in doing it. I think that's the difference.
Okay. For the benefit of younger listeners or those may not be so news savvy, could you, what would you like to tell us about Operation Spanner and why, where are we, 80s, the best part of 40 years on, there's an organisation which exists as a result of that Operation Spanner?
Yes, of course. I mean, the ruling, which, as you said, went all to the European Court, basically set the threshold for injuries that you can and can't consent to be extremely low. So in that case, there were no injuries more than a few bruises or cuts, but even that was deemed to be illegal, that you couldn't consent to that. Now, as you said earlier, people go mountain climbing, they go boxing and suffer brain injuries.
Horse riding, rugby,
all sorts of things.
Yep.
Yeah, people. But because sex was involved, of course, common sense goes out the window, and the fact that these were gay men, which at that time didn't help either, meant that the point at which you could consent was basically, if I tap you, that's all right. If I punch you and it's outside the boxing ring, then that's not, even though you may consent it and want it, or vice versa. So we're still campaigning. We're there to provide legal support to people and to keep an eye on things like this and to keep track of what's going on.
I'm writing thinking, Derek, oh God, I lose track of time. So about 2-3 years ago, there were reforms introduced by Parliament, which I know from friends who work in the pornographic industry were concerned that S&M porn in particular may become illegal.
Yes, there were concerns about that, and yes, and there have been various cases one way or the other. I mean, fortunately, where there have been prosecutions in the past few years, this being 3 o'clock, I'm not sure what I can talk about, right. But certain cases where videos were deemed to be okay and not illegal because the juries found that those sexual practices were acceptable. But there's a difference between saying, okay, it's all right to film it, but it's not all right to do other things. So that, yes, there were some changes, and there has been some movement.
So just by way of conclusion, I don't think we can take the story of Dr. Evil any further, and I think you've made some really clear and legitimate points that differentiate it from the repercussions of Operation Spanner. But on the impact of what an individual, an adult, chooses to do sexually, gay, straight, I really don't care, in the privacy of their own home or somebody else's home, again, I don't really care. Should the law keep out? Is there a line to be drawn? I mean, you said the line is the threshold is very low. Maybe, if it's consensual and people want to do it, I don't know.
It's very difficult because, yes, if someone wants to have a sexual experience which involves their arm being broken or something like that, then yes, that's debatable, and I don't have a firm view either way because that's so far above the threshold that there is currently. I think that yes, there needs to be more acceptance. I mean, the fact is that SM imagery, you see billboards with women with high boots and whips, and you see men in cages, and all this. I mean, it's all very public in terms of the imagery that's around there. So SM activity is very much more accepted now, and you see a lot of violence in films as well.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's a sense, the general mood of the public is, in a sense, way ahead of the law at the moment, and the law needs to be changed.